Hello again. Uh, this is the second in a series of videos I'm going to do on just basic fundamentals, really. My first one was on how to hold a guitar pick. That got a lot of great response. So we're going to do another one that's near and dear to my heart. It's something I wish I had an instructor walk me through when I was learning to play guitar long time ago. And that is over gripping your guitar neck, putting too much tension on the strings. And I'll show you some tricks on how you can work out the problem yourself, some things you can do to identify if you're actually having a problem. And it's interesting because it manifests itself a lot of times people saying that their guitar won't stay in tune. They're playing and they're out of tune. You'll hear people, on stage at open mics or whatever, and they sound like they'll tune, and then they play and they still sound like they're out of tune, and they'll say, my guitar won't stay in tune. We see this happen a lot with a lot of people that buy lower end guitars, like their first guitar, their second guitar. They'll over grip the neck, and it knocks the guitar out of tune when they do that, or it makes the notes out of tune. And they say, oh, I need to buy a better guitar. It's usually not the case. These necks and the distance from the nut to the bridge, that's pretty well, everybody handles that pretty well now. Nobody's custom cutting their fretboards anymore, right? So this stuff is all in tune. So let's go through some things. One of the things you can tell is when a guitar's in tune, like it sounds pretty and nice. But you'll notice here, if I play this F sharp note here, that's in tune. And then if I press down on it, it's a little bit out. If I press harder on it, it's a little bit out. And some things I can notice right away when I have students in, if I see the tips of their fingers go white, like the blood's being pressed out of the tips of their fingers, it usually means they're pressing too hard on the strings. So you can take something that sounds nice, and all of a sudden sounds, I heard somebody say like, oh, it sounds like fake chorus, like they've got a fake chorus effect on their guitar, right? It's slightly detuned. So I'm going to show you a couple of tricks that you can do to identify it when you're doing it, and some things you can do to practice. One of the things you can do to practice to get rid of this is you can just practice playing with as little pressure as you possibly can. So if you were to think like, you're do a standard spider walk on the guitar, so 1, 2, 3, 4 across the frets. It's a standard exercise, but you can do it. You can play it where you're not pressing at all. You're barely pressing down, and then you're pressing to where you can just get the note to come out. And then the next one. And then you can kind of really feel like how much pressure do you really need to do that. And that's really kind of the key there. You can tell here, if I press too hard, it's out of tune. But it's that having very little tension on the strings is the key to being fast, really. If you're over gripping, your fingers can't come off the strings fast enough. You see people buying like fast fret and stuff like that to get, basically because their fingers aren't coming off the strings fast enough. It's one of those things. Not that fast fret's a bad thing. You're basically just like coating the strings. We use coated strings now for that, a bunch of things like that. But that's one thing to look at. But I'm going to show you something. This is a little bit of a 2-for-1 lesson. If you're here, if you made it this far into it, you're going to learn some really cool stuff. So I'm going to use a tuner to show you the actual problem. So let me just switch over to this other screen here. So one of the things we can see as you can see, I'm using Helix Native to go into my, but any tuner you have will do it. But what makes this really clear is when you're using strobe tuners. Strobe tuners are, your Snart tuners don't really have this kind of functionality. You need like a TC Electric or a Peterson. Petersons are the benchmark tuners that do this kind of stuff. But basically, the way a strobe tuner works is these lights spin left or right depending on if you're sharp or flat, and you really want to tune it to where your strings where they stop moving, right? Or they're really close to like not moving anymore. So for example, like here I've got an A, and if I press hard on that A, see it goes out of sharp. It goes sharp. So here, and I press hard, it goes out of tune. So it's one of those things that can really help you a lot. So here, I'm on this F sharp or G flat. I'm on this F sharp. I press hard, it goes a little out of tune. On the bigger strings, it's more apparent. But it's one of these things. It's a good little trick you can do to say, is my guitar actually in tune? And then you can tune it. You can get it perfect. In the studio, I always use strobe tuners when people come in to record, and just get it absolutely perfect and tune between every song when they record, or actually every take when they record. And right, and you can just kind of check to make sure, like, are you over pressing? If I was over pressing on that E, it would be there. Right, and there's that D. Right, the string's a little sharp, but me pressing on that D is very sharp, right? It's a problem. So it's a thing, and I constantly work at it, and I struggle with this a lot. I'm a nervous player, so I tend to over grip, especially when I'm playing live. So it's just something to work on, right? And that's a little bit better. So it's something to work on. It helps you out a lot. Also, strobe tuners are great. It's the only way to get your guitar intonation in. Sometimes, when you get it out of the factory, there might be something like this is Gibson has, this is called the Tune-O-Matic bridge. Let you know there's nothing automatic about it. It just lets you move these pins right here to fine tune the adjustment. And the way you can do that with a strobe tuner, so you get this perfect. Like, I'm going to get this E as perfect as I possibly can. And there. And then I press on the E string here, and it should be almost dead on. If you do that, if you play that at the 12th fret, and the open string 12th fret, and there's a big difference in tuning, you need to get the intonation adjusted on your guitar. And it's really easy. It's just a matter of like taking a screw and taking a screwdriver and moving this up and back. On this bridge, other bridges, there's like a little pin. Acoustic's a little bit different. That's a little bit different. You might actually have to like shave the bone bridge a little bit. But that's very rare. But for most of the stuff, you're going to run into it. It's going to be great. All guitars, unless they're super, super cheap guitar, they'll get in tune. They'll stay in tune. And the intonation, once it's set up, you're going to always be in tune. And when you hear people, play a chord and it sounds out of tune, look, and if you're doing it or somebody else is doing it, look at their fingers and see, like, are the tips of their fingers all white when they're playing? Are they grabbing at the neck like a baseball bat? Or are they, what are they doing? We see it a lot with acoustic players, people that learn to play acoustic first. Especially if acoustic guitars aren't set up. If you have an acoustic guitar and you haven't taken to get it set up, you need to do it. I don't care how much it costs. It's got to get done. Unless you're in that like $3,000 range, and it better come set up already. But take it, and it'll get a lot easier to play. They'll get the strings close to the fretboard. Because what happens is acoustic players, they get so used to having to press down really hard. When they pick up an electric, like everything's out of tune when they do it. That's a trip. So that's, strobe tuners in general it's all I use nowadays, and they're super helpful. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and let me know if you need any help. All right, thanks a lot.